Hi, I'm Ellen from the Chili Dog. Today I'm going to show you how to do the Russian join when you're changing colors of yarn in your knitting. The Russian join is a neat knotless way to connect two pieces of yarn so you won't have to weave in yarn tails later. If you are completely new to this concept, I'll include a link in the video description to my basic Russian join tutorial. The idea of the Russian join is to overlap the two pieces of yarn that you're joining together, and then you weave the tail of each one back into itself to create a connection. When you're using a single color of yarn, the location of the join doesn't necessarily matter because after a few stitches are knit, this join is virtually going to disappear into your knitting. However, when you're switching colors at the join, you likely want the color change to happen at a very specific location in your stitch pattern. So let me show you how to make that happen. I'm working on a sock toe and I want my color change to happen at the center of my toe on the bottom of the foot. So I have knit across to where I want the color change to happen. I want this next stitch to be in the new color. The first thing I need to do is to break my new yarn. And what this does is it gives the end of the yarn a kind of feathered, tapered end here instead of a blunt end. And that just makes things less likely to pop out of the join later on. So now I'm going to thread my new yarn onto a needle. I'm going to wrap my new yarn around the old yarn. And then I want to weave the tail back into itself. So what I'm going to do is just take the needle and go right through the center of the yarn. And once I've brought my needle through the center of the yarn a little bit further than the tail that I'm weaving in, I'm going to pull the needle and the tail all the way through. I'm going to take off my needle and then I'm going to slide the knot down the tail so that it's close to where the join is, and then I'm going to just straighten things out to conceal that tail in the center of the yarn. And now you can see it's pretty much hidden in there. Now I'm going to slide the joined new yarn down to my needles, and I want to break my piece of old yarn. So I am just going to break it, and again, the reason I'm breaking it is so that it gets that feathered tapered edge. So it has the feathered tapered edge, and now I want to position the piece of yarn that I've already joined 1 needle diameter away from my knitting. I'm going to zoom in here so we can take a close look at that. So I want this joined piece to be just a little bit more than the needle diameter away from where my last stitch is. And I want to make sure that I'm not pulling on the yarn when I do that. I want the tail of the old yarn to be just relaxed and that last stitch to be relaxed. And then I want the join new yarn to be about a needle diameter away. And I'll show you why that's important in just a minute. So now, very carefully, without moving the new yarn or sliding it up the join, I need to tink back or unknit about 10 stitches. And I'm going to zoom out to do that. So very carefully, I'm just going to unwork 10 stitches being careful not to slide this join on the old yarn at all so that it can't move around. So 1, 2, now that I've tinked back my stitches, I have enough room to work and to weave the tail of the old yarn back into itself. So again, I'm going to thread it onto my needle. Again, being careful not to slide that new piece of yarn around on the old piece. And then I want to begin weaving in the tail of the old yarn very close to where this new yarn is positioned. So I'm going to go just on the other side of it. And then again, I'm just going to bring my needle right through the center of the yarn. And I'm going to go a little bit further than I think that my tail is long. And again, once my needle is loaded, I'm going to pull the yarn all the way through. And then I can drop the needle off. I'm going to hold onto the yarn tail and slide the join down so that it's kind of bunched up there. And then I'm going to smooth things out by pulling that new yarn and just smoothing everything out so that that yarn tail is concealed inside the old piece of yarn. So the reason before that we left about a needle diameter between the join and the base of the stitch we were working is now you can see our yarn is just very ever so slightly thicker than it was before because it has that yarn tail down the core on each side of the yarn. Since it's a little bit thicker, it's going to take a little bit longer length of yarn to work the 10 stitches that we unknit before. So now we'll reknit those 10 stitches. And there we are at the center. And now the next stitch that I make will be in the new color because the join is concealed there in between those last 2 stitches. So the next stitch is in my new color of yarn. I hope you enjoyed learning how to change yarn colors using the Russian join. And if you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel, The Chili Dog, for more knitting tips and tutorials. Until we stitch again, happy knitting!